All right. Good evening, friends. So I have with us tonight Sister Marcy. Um, so before we get started, Marcy, why don't you tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, who you are, your conversion to Christ, and what you're up to these days?
Well, I'm Marcy. You guys know me as autocorrect. I came to Christ. Well, I've believed in Christ my whole life, but I officially started following him in 2020, studying the Bible and all of that. And what else did you want to know?
Yeah, so I think just a little bit about yourself, yeah, and where people can find you, but you think you already said that in autocorrect. So I was thinking we could go a lot of different routes, but there's two routes I wanted to go with you tonight, and one is discussing the pitfalls of atheism, and those two were morality and the impossibility of life absent design. So, I mean, we've been acting a little bit on Twitter, and I've noticed like you're pretty good at apologetics as well. So, why don't you tell people why? First of all, why is atheism impossible with morality?
Well, okay, so atheism has no foundation for objective morality. They
Right.
have a foundation for subjective morality, which, some people would argue isn't a thing, because in order for morality to have any meaning at all, it needs to have an objective source.
Right. It has to be either. The thing is, there's no such thing as subjective value or morality, anyways, because it's either a moral or moral. It's not kind of moral, right? So, okay, to explain to people why atheism has no foundation for objective morality.
Because if we all just evolved from a single-celled organism that came about by accident, there is no authority by which morality would come from. Because for morality to exist, you have to have an objective source and it has to have an authority. So without that authority, morality is just a human opinion. And the only way to enforce it is with violence, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, because,
Yeah.
that would, some people consider that immoral. So, the only way to have morality outside of God would be for humans to gather and just might makes right. Basically, they would all have to agree to enforce morality with violence and or removing freedoms. So
right.
I guess that can change depending on, what humans are agreeing on at any given point in time. So it really isn't some objective, like, for example, to say rape is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Rape would need to always be wrong no matter who agrees with you for objective
Exactly.
morality to be real.
Yeah.
But if a group of humans decide that rape's not wrong, then suddenly rape becomes not wrong. That's still subjective morality. It's not objective because it changes.
Right, and I would agree that, and I think you would too, that subjective morality and atheism evolution play a large part of the mess we're in today in the West.
Yeah, it's like in the book of Judges where they said men did what was right in their own eyes. Mm-hmm. And, as long as men are deciding what's right and wrong on their own, that's the kind of society that you find yourself in.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to get your input on this too. Is like, in my observation, in reality, and on the internet, I find that the rejection of God has very little to do with intellectual pursuit, but I find it's mostly that most people reject God's standard of sexuality between one man and one woman in marriage. What I would like you to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the rejection of God stems from a desire to not submit to his design, mm-hmm. a desire to be your own God, mm-hmm. and that doesn't necessarily, it's often about sex in our society, but a lot of times it can be about, substance abuse. It can be about, lots of things that you want to do that, just not wanting to conform to the plan that God has for you or the design.
Right. So basically, a a refusal to submit to the authority of someone outside yourself.
Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think when I look, the sexual stuff seems to be the big one. Like if we think about it, abortion, trans, the LGBT movement, like it's all about sex. Yeah. So I mean, and
Sorry, I
obviously,
apologize. Like the camera moves like counterintuitively to what you expect. So
oh,
I'm
that's okay. That's okay,
struggling
Marcy.
with myself in the picture. But go ahead.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I was gonna ask. So what? So you like me? Like I have never been able to even when I was living apart from Christ, living in like fornicating and pornography and all that crap. I never had the thought that the Bible, Jesus or God wasn't real. Like I like you. I lived like I was like it didn't matter. Like basically, I had a mentor of mine who said like I lived like a practical atheist. Like for all intents and purposes, I lived as though God didn't exist, but I never in my mind could go as far as just saying there is no God. I think you've mentioned that too, right? Like even when in the depths of your like depravity or whatever, you'd probably never go as far as say there's no God. You just live like it didn't matter.
Right. Exactly. Like I've believed in God since I was a child, but
Yeah, same.
in my darkest moments, I would often talk to God. I
Uh,
wasn't conforming to his plan, but I
yeah, I don't know.
I
Sorry, go
never
ahead.
rejected his existence.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, actually, I share this in my testimony. I'll just share it with you now, and then I'll get back to the pitfalls of atheism. That was once I was at a strip joint. I was about to get a lap dance, and just before, like, I was so much shaking with conviction. I just got up and I didn't go through with it. And I remember being outside, like screaming in my spirit to telling God to leave me alone. Of course, now in retrospect, I'm glad He didn't. But so even in my rebellion, God was still chasing us, and I think you can probably attest to that too. Like even in your rebellion, you could probably sense the spirit of God still chasing you down.
Yeah, I definitely felt convicted
Mhm.
when I was in that time of my life. Yeah.
And the thing too is like, okay, we'll go back to atheism. Is that I mean, I've said, I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with him too, Daniel, who's his handle is at Darwin to Jesus. I don't know if you're familiar with. Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
Yeah.
Do you know Daniel?
Yeah, yes. I don't know
Okay,
him,
so
but I know
yeah,
him.
yeah, I don't. Same with me, but I don't know anyone on Twitter personally. I'm like, I find like I'm one of the few Canadians on here. Anyways, he said, and Paul talks about this, and that there are people, of course, and atheists would fit this category, who suppress the truth and the righteousness. But I don't really believe that there's actually an atheist. I think everybody knows it. Um, you know, and I think Paul talks about again Romans 1 about people suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Um, but I don't think actually anyone really believes that atheism is true. And I think, and the reason being is that I believe that God has written His law in our hearts. I mean, Joel says it. Paul said that even the Gentiles who don't have the light of Christ still have a sense of right and wrong for that reason. And so I don't really believe there are atheists. I think it's more like atheists don't really like how God runs a show.
Yeah, so I have this kind of rule for myself is I choose to believe the Bible over what man says. And since Romans
Right.
1 tells us that nobody is really an atheist, I tend to
Exactly.
that over their claims that they don't believe in God. I also feel like their behavior doesn't match their claim.
No, it never does.
Just because when you don't believe in something, you're indifferent to it. And their
Well,
response,
exactly. They're not indifferent to it. They're obsessed with it.
well, yeah. And their response to people who do is just with like so much rage and like,
Yeah.
disdain, mockery, and just
I mean,
obsession that's not what disbelief looks like. That's what.
exactly. It would if I would, like you said, it would be a difference. Like I've said this before, and I've said it again. Like, and I actually mean this because like as a straight white single male, like if I really believe that God didn't exist, like I'd probably fornicate for the rest of my life because there's no ultimate reject reality. Like, and fornication is not even wrong if there's no God because there's no ultimate morality, anyways. But I mean, the thing is, like we all know that God has built that consciousness or His law in our heart. So, like, even if there's no Bible, like you still know it's wrong to assault somebody because God wrote His law in your heart.
Right. And
But go ahead.
like behavior is more consistent with rebellion than disbelief.
Exactly. And like
Yeah.
that's what I said. Like if I was truly an atheist, I wouldn't waste my life like these guys like Aaron Ra or Matt Dillahunty. I would just like live like differently, like I mentioned already. I'd probably just be sexually promiscuous. But I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't like. That's the thing too. Is like the anger and the rage. Like I had I don't know if you're. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but I had a video conversation with Aaron Ra. Like you disagree with him on one little thing, and you see like just this anger, and like where does that come from, right? Like it's definitely not indifference, and I think that's the ring true, and so that's why it doesn't make sense morality because like we've already established for morality to be objective, the standard has to be like there has to be an authority. Otherwise, like if my morality is contrary to your morality, it's just a matter of opinion, preference, right? It's just like I like chocolate, you like ice cream. Like there's no right and wrong. It's a matter of preference.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's the thing I think is like atheists seem to be completely oblivious to this. Like without God, you have no source of morality. But then, like how many times you and I both have probably counted the number of times atheists have tried to make the God of the Old Testament out to be a moral monster, right?
Yeah.
Especially in regards to like slavery or the Noah's flood.
Yeah, no, they're basically making moral judgments that they have no foundation for. It's like they're saying, I don't like his outfit. They might
exactly. So yeah. It's like they can't seem to understand that without God, it's like as Frank Turk said too. It's not like you can't be God. So it's not that you can't be moral without God. It's that you have no justification for morality without God.
Right.
And I think because like I think most atheists, like most people, like will probably are straight. Will go work hard, pay their taxes, be law-abiding citizens, get married and raise a family. I think most people have that innately in them because God has built us to think like that. And well, the people who don't are a very vocal minority. But I mean, like when I go about my day, I don't see the average man or woman struggling with their sexuality. I see most people conforming into it rather just naturally because that's the way God built us. But I think, like, and I remember too, Matt Dillahunty and Jordan Peterson had a conversation. I don't remember when, but anyways, I was watching it on YouTube a few days ago, and at one point, Matt Dillahunty said, "I don't believe in God," and Jordan said, "But you live like he does." I mean, like, it's like if like Sam Harris, who's a pretty well-known atheist, who said, it's like if you didn't believe in God, like, what's to stop you from throwing Sam off the stage, right? It's because there's consequences. So the atheist will live like God exists because of God's law been written on your heart, and nobody really believes in subjective morality. I've heard there's another gentleman on Twitter who said, like, if an atheist, like, if your spouse cheated on you, you're not gonna act like that doesn't matter. You're gonna be furious because that's a normal response to being betrayed.
Yeah, if atheism as a worldview were correct, there is really no reason for us to have evolved, these traits of like labeling things as, right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because animals don't do that, right? And they survive just fine. Animals, they'll argue like animals can sometimes act with empathy or they can share, but just as many times they can also just, eat their young and,
Well, look at a praying mantis, right? After a praying mantis mates, the female will bite the head off the male. Like, I don't think that's kind of that's the kind of behavior we want to mimic or copy.
Right. And it's like instinctual behaviors. So there was no reason though for us, I have this thing about evolution where I'm like, you don't need to make something more complicated thrive in like its simpler form, which, so it's like if a bacteria is surviving fine as a bacteria, it doesn't need to increase its need for energy, increase its need for, resources by gaining functions, right? Because then it needs more food, it needs more specified environment. So for humans to have evolved all of this complex reasoning is like, it doesn't make sense because it's like, by fine without it. And if anything, I would say it's a hindrance, because we overthink things and we get distracted by things that, animals don't worry about, which wouldn't help survival. So I don't know.
I've had this question asked to me too, and by Gary at Fort Worth, Texas. It's his handle on Twitter. He asked me, and I'll ask you the same question. Why do you think atheism has done to become, like, why do you think it's so popular today? Like, why do you think it's like, it's almost like it's a trendy thing? Go ahead.
I think it's the default of what's being taught in schools. I mean, everyone is sending their children to public schools where they're being taught that, life arose from non-life and evolved into all these different categories. And we're just fancy monkeys, walking around. And like, that's what we're taught in school. And children go to school and basically don't question anything they're taught there. So leave, and then they go to universities and they have it reinforced even more. And they leave there with this, authority that this is the truth. This is what I've been told. And, parents are not doing the job at home of teaching kids a biblical worldview for the most part. I'm not saying nobody does, but
no. But I think go ahead.
But by and large, even when a parent is identifying as a Christian, they're likely not teaching their children a biblical worldview. Churches are failing at being thorough in teaching people biblical literacy. We've basically just let secularism encroach upon our lives and become the norm. And we really you see it all the time on Twitter. I'll be trying to talk to somebody and I don't want to say educating people because I don't really think anyone learns anything most of the time, but you'll see me arguing with somebody and then you'll see a bunch of Christians come be like, stop casting your pearls. Just stop alone. Just don't argue. And it's like, well, that's how we got here because we stopped speaking the truth. We just let the lies just creep and we let the lies become, presented as the truth for so long. Now we're fighting an uphill battle.
Well, exactly. Because like, if we think about the early church, like, for example, like the book of Acts, like we turn the world upside down. Like everyone was talking about us. Like we by I think 300 AD, Constantine had legalized Christianity, which was not. I don't think that was probably a good way to be because I think the church. The church always grows fastest when she's under persecution, and that's what was one of the biggest examples. The biggest reasons for the growth of the early church was because of the massive persecution it faced. And we look at the world today; it's always the countries where Christianity is most persecuted, like say China. That like the explosive rate of Christianity where the church is persecuted grows like crazy. But we're seeing a decline in the West because it's illegal to, for the most part, it's illegal to hunt us down, like say, we were back in like World War II Nazi Germany. But I don't think that day is too far off. I mean, I know of two pastors in just Toronto, an hour east of me, who have been arrested for preaching the gospel. It's always in regards to the homosexual stuff because in here it's considered hate speech. I don't know where it is where you are, but maybe you can speak to that. Like when I stop for a minute, but like I think the Christians in the West take things too glibly. Like the Christians that I've worked with and know with, like it's just like it's almost like they're biblically illiterate.
Yeah. I mean, churches have not been doing their job. But all this is predicted in Revelation. I mean, you read
Oh
Jesus's
yeah,
letter to Sardis, it says you are dead. To Laodicea, it's telling them they're lukewarm.
warm.
I,
Yeah, I
so,
think we're a lukewarm. I think the West is a lukewarm church.
oh, definitely. So, I
Mhm.
mean, you've got like, and it also tells us persecution is coming, right? In the tribulation, people are persecuted, and Jesus says that, hey, if you find yourself in the tribulation, submit to that. That
Yeah,
it's, it said, like, he even said, don't fight back. Be ready to give
I
your life.
think the majority of people who go to church in the West would like if they were forced to be persecuted or killed. Would I'm sorry, I'm out of here. I honestly believe that.
No, yeah, I don't think, I think most people wouldn't survive under persecution, but that's why the church thrives under persecution. Is the only people that are willing to join a persecuted church are people who are truly sold
Committed.
out
Yeah.
and that truly have faith. So that's why, the letter to the church of Smyrna, it's regard like, the church is named for myrrh, which releases a sweet odor when crushed. And
Ah,
the
interesting.
church, yeah, the church is the same way. It flourishes when it's crushed because, again, you're weeding out all of those lukewarm people that are preaching a watered down gospel, because those people are going to run away at the
Oh
first sign
yeah.
of trouble. It's the people who are sold out
I
with the
mean,
whole.
just to name like famous people like Kenneth Copeland or Joel Osteen. These guys won't last a day under persecution.
Yeah, it's. I doubt it. It would.
Yeah,
They did.
yeah,
But yeah, it's the people with the Holy Spirit that are going to stick around, and that's where you have a strong church when everybody is Holy Spirit filled. You're not mixed with the wheat and the tares. You don't have the birds nesting in the branches, so to speak.
yeah. I mean, and the other thing is too is like I think that most churches like have very like little to nothing about in regards to apologetics and apologetics in my mind is just the other side of the coin of evangelism because evangelism is being faithful to the Great Commission in Matthew 28, but evangelism is being faithful to always be ready to give an answer for those who ask to hope in 1 Peter 3:15. And I think that most Christians, like in my experience, and I'm sure yours too, like if you ask them, why do you believe in the gospel? And what would you do if some Muslim, if you had a conversation with a non-Christian, whether whoever from whatever walk of life, what would you say? Most Christians, like I've heard one Catholic lady say, "Oh, I just believe in God." I'm like, so does Satan. It's not helping his case.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think people go to church to check a box. They're not really learning the Bible. That's why I do what I do on Twitter, because
Mm,
when I decided to start following Jesus seriously, I started studying with Chuck Missler,
mm.
um, his Bible studies, and I was blown away where how much proof there is for the Bible if you really study it.
Oh yeah,
I would have, and I learned things I would have never learned in a church, like ever. Like churches don't teach these things. And so that's why I was like, man, there really is a need for somebody to be out there telling people these things that, tie the Bible together, that show that the Bible
yeah,
is from God, that it's not just some book written by men,
yeah,
to say
exactly.
people.
Um, I honestly think that like apologetics would be like core teaching in churches. I'm sure you probably would too.
I agree. I think that I just don't think that, the American church is very comfortable. Um,
Mhm.
they're uh, very focused on, and I don't want to take away from the fact that I think that the churches in America still do a lot of acts of service, which is great.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
well, even the Catholic Church is known for that.
right, but they don't do enough education, and I think, like Jesus said, you'll always have the poor with you, and yet,
Mhm.
it's kind of that way. It's like you should prioritize serving your community, yes, but it's like once you bring them in the door, what are you offering them at that point? Because it's like the
Oh,
point
exactly.
is to get them to know Christ and be saved. And if you're not bringing about a saving faith in people by giving them all of the gospel, all of the information, then what are you doing? You know?
Yeah, and the thing is too is like, as we both know, like too, like, you know, when you evangelize, people are gonna ask questions, and that's where you gotta know, your stuff. I
Right.
mean, my biggest two things have always been with atheism, Catholicism. You know, but I'm glad there's guys like David Wood who are, you know, talking about Islam, because it's just like, in Islam, obviously Muslims need evangelism too. That's just not my thing. So I'm glad there's guys like David Wood who fill those gaps. So what I want to talk about now is atheism. So we've already established why atheism doesn't work morally. Um, so let's move on to the next point I want to discuss with you tonight, Marcy, which is why atheism doesn't work absent design. Like, why is design necessary for life?
Well, I think the simplest point, because there's lots of points to look at, is probability.
Yes.
Because so many different moving parts had to come together in the correct way to create our universe, to create our planet, to create our solar system, to put us in this unique position to be in a place where what they claim is life came about by a chance occurrence where the right conditions, you know, came together so that proteins could form a bond. They haven't explained how the first cell wall came about, because that's, you know, they haven't been able to replicate. They can replicate proteins making chains under certain conditions, but they can't replicate them becoming a cell on their own, because
No.
the time we've seen cells, you know, come from anywhere is another living cell. We've never been able to see a cell created out of, you know,
Exactly. And like, you know, to bring up David Wood again, he said that if you told me that, like, say for example, the wall behind me arranged itself, he said I'd smack you in the mouth. But then I believe that life could happen without intelligence. But a single cell is more complex than the wall behind me.
yeah, it's a machine. It's got, you know, moving parts. It operates like a machine, and all machinery that we see around us, we know is designed.
Mhm.
So it's ludicrous on its face. I honestly think it's insulting to our children that that's what we teach them. But I mean, you see the arguments on Twitter. It's like people
No,
think,
it's ridiculous. Like,
so.
I actually closed all my comments on YouTube for atheism. It's just because it's not like I can't take it. It's just like it's all the same crap. Like, it's just, you know, I think the only thing that atheists seem to have mastered is copy and paste button. Like,
Well,
it's just like it's all the same.
it's a lot of posturing. I mean, I noticed that they're really heavy on the insults and the
Oh
personal
yeah.
attack, really light on the facts. I mean, they'll present a fact here and there, but they can't defend it very effectively. So it always goes back to, you know,
Well, here's the
you're
thing.
trash.
Have you ever had atheists actually just, without attacking Christianity or your position, have you ever had atheists actually just defend why they think atheism is true? I haven't.
I've run into a couple that have had reasonable conversations with me, but I want to say it's maybe like 2 out of 100 or 2 out of
Yeah.
150 people that
So
I.
it's basically it doesn't happen very often.
Right.
Most of it is, I find, just like projection, deflection, ad hominem, straw man, or some combination thereof.
I feel like atheism itself is the worldview that is the emperor with no clothes. You know that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like everyone tells, like, you've seen those articles out there that's like atheists found to be smarter than religious people, and
Well,
I
I
think,
also thought it was hilarious when someone posted a link that said atheists are more generous than Christians. I'm like, yeah, sure.
yeah, there's just the propaganda that's like they're feeding this propaganda that this is what intelligence is, and so you have people mimicking intelligence, and they're like but they're not. So it's like they're, and
No.
then applauding them. So it's like this guy walking naked through town and everyone's applauding them. And I feel like the little kid going like, he's not wearing any clothes. Like he's not saying anything intelligent. This worldview doesn't even make sense. Like it falls apart under any scrutiny, but everyone's applauding. So you just have to
Yeah.
ask.
No, that's I like that. That's a good analogy. But like it's so true. It's just like, I mean, that's why I remember. It was like one beautiful sunny summer day a number of years ago. I honestly tried to concede atheism, and I just looked around and I just said, "There's just no possible way this could happen without design." It's like you said, it's an insult to think that, if you think about, like you said, we're talking about a single cell protein. Now, I've actually said this before too, and I'll say it again. Like if an atheist would just spend like one entire day to study the complexity of the human body, if you can study the complexity of the human body and still come to the conclusion that there's no God, and I said, well, I'm not trying to be. It is insulting, but if you really think that the human body could be here absent design, you're an idiot. Like there's just no other way to put it. And it's insulting to tell people they're idiots, but I mean, like you have to have some deficiency in your faculties to think that humans are not designed.
It's a commitment to a worldview, a little cognitive dissonance. One thing I like to explain to them is like to explain how, for example, the human body, you have a heart, you have lungs, you have circulation, all of that interdependent on each other. And I'm like, so imagine it like a puzzle piece, right? A 1,000-piece puzzle. So it's like you can sit down and solve a puzzle in one sitting. Like you wouldn't, it would take you a while, but you could do it. Meanwhile, you could throw that puzzle in a clothes dryer how many billions of times and it'll never come out solved. I'm like,
that's a good analogy.
It's just like, so you're all you have to do to get rid of like your problems of probability is add one intelligent actor to the whole process, and suddenly the probability becomes 100% rather than 1 in a billion, however many. And that solves the because really what they're talking about is a threshold beyond impossible. If you Google it, there is a threshold of impossible, and the probability of everything that we know of coming together by chance exceeds that threshold.
And Frank Turk has said in one of his presentations that if you saw a message, like say the alphabets have the letters, and you saw like the alphabets read take out the garbage, mom. You would know that didn't align itself randomly. That required intelligence. That your mom used the letters from that cereal to put together an intelligent message saying to take out the garbage. Now, if you look at one strand of DNA, which is infinitely more complex than that message, and that's the thing too, is DNA is biological code. So last time I checked, code requires a coder.
Correct. And
so
it is more than just. It's like it has to serve a purpose. It has to have a representative code that can be understood or read by another, like by something else. And it meets all of that criteria for information. And information is always evidence of a mind. It doesn't just happen.
Well, that's the thing too, is like you talked about earlier, like, all the the functions of the body, like your kidney, your heart, and like, Paul kind of gave gave that illustration too, like for example, like, the eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you, or vice versa. But the thing is too, is like systems are indicative of design. The fact that your body works in systematically in harmony is indication that someone put it together.
Yeah.
Because,
otherwise
like,
scenarios of like, how do you have a heart with no lungs? How do you have blood with no heart, so on and so forth.
Even Darwin conceded that the human eye was actually a big problem for him, and the reason being is for the human eye to work, all the parts have to come together at the same time. Well, that kind of is a bit of a problem for macroevolution, of course. And the thing is, it's true. Oh, there's a great comfort set too. There's also over 3 million light-sensitive cells per eye.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we've exhausted this enough for tonight. Thanks for coming on with me, Marcy. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy lady. So just tell people again where they can find you. Can they find you only on Twitter, or do you have other social media?
My main ministry is on Twitter. Yeah, that's
okay. And what's your handle again?
It's at autocorrect2_0.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Marcy. Have a great night.
All right, you too.
That's it. I'm just going to stop recording. Right.